Hey everybody, this is Patti Negr. Welcome to the Witching Hour. Yes, the hour of the day when the veil is thin and magic happens. I have some spooky fun magic for you today. I have the one and only Beckie-Ann Galentine. She is paranormal investigator, licensed embalmer, and so much more. I can't wait. I'm excited to get to know you. Welcome, Beckie-Ann.
Thank you so much for having me, Patty.
I hear we've crossed paths a few times. I didn't even know. I just got back from Mass Paracon, but last year we were there together, but again, together separately, passing each other's cross. For people who don't know yet, how did you work into this paranormal world of ours?
So, my first experience that I had was when I was studying science. So, I was studying laboratory science and I experienced something I couldn't explain in a graveyard of all places. I know some people are a little apprehensive about calling a graveyard haunted. And after that, I just became obsessed with the idea of replicating that. And I was skipping class and showing up late the next morning and staying out late, always tired. And I realized this institution is not going to provide me what I need to know about this. And through my journey, I've learned that there's beauty in the inability to replicate these experiences and the idea of something being meant for you in that moment, set place where I'm not meant to replicate this. So I did have an experience a long time ago, and I told myself, no, that's not what it was. And as I grew, I accepted that was paranormal and it was meant for me to see, but I'm meant to see it in different ways as I go along this journey. So that's how I ended up being interested in it. However, it really changed and became my entire life while I was working as an embalmer, because on my 2 days off, I would just explore haunted locations. I was working in the peak of COVID. So I have 2 days off and I just couldn't make friends because we were in a lockdown. So I just started exploring these like beautiful historic locations in New England and it changed my life.
Wow, that's amazing. And so, how did the embalmer part come about? That's
Several years ago, I had lost a friend and it changed the trajectory of my life in more ways than I expected it to at that point. At that time, I was like, dead is dead. Nobody comes back from that. And I didn't know what to explore at that point. I saw these people in this scene that I was in, this music scene, as vibrant people that I thought could live forever. They felt immortal to me. And when someone I was very close to, who always believed in me, passed away, I said, I need this death to mean something to me. I need to turn this. And grief does make you feel like you need to make it matter. And I took that grief and pain and put it into studying. I had a 4.0 in school, and I always just thought in the back of my mind, I'm doing this for her. I'm doing this for Franny. And at a certain point, that's all I was thinking. That was the capacity of it. I saw a medium. I had never seen a medium before. I didn't know if I even believed in that. And I sat down with this woman in Salem, actually, and she looked at me and she said, there's someone with you with blue hair. And I just was like, there's no way you would guess that. Any person that tells me now at this point, like, there's mediums that don't know what they're, ever since that moment, I was like, no, you would not just look at me and say, you have someone who passed away recently with blue hair. And it just gave me chills. And she said, you're helping people like her. And it was just so, there was no way she could have known. I didn't have a platform at that point. So it created this cohesive relationship between the afterlife and end of life care that has made me who I am.
that's pretty amazing. And yes, it's I love. So, have you gone more into that mediumship world that you accepted it as part of who you are? Obviously, does it? How does it conflict with your science that I cannot replicate this, which is science, as we know? Does that crash or does that inspire?
I think at some point it has created challenges because I was in a field that teaches you that death is an irreversible cessation of life. That is the exact definition. And I just believe that, but there were too many kernels being planted in my life. And I don't know if that's everyone's path, but it's certainly mine. While I was sitting in class, I had my professor tell me a ghost story, and everyone quietly turns around and they're like, you heard that. She said that. Do you believe it? And I was like, huh. what motivation does a mortuary school professor have to tell us this? So it eventually became a point where I was telling ghost stories online, but I wasn't saying I believed them. I was just saying alleged, it is said that. And one day I was like, what do I have to lose? And now with the platform that I do and the things that I talk about, with the combination of grief and ghosts and all those things coming together, I do have some people that'll push back, and it will cause me trouble re-entering the field if I do want to work as a mortician, because they truly believe that it's a liability and it could complicate grief. So that's the major challenge, is people think that believing in the afterlife can always complicate grief.
It's interesting because if you take traditional religion, everybody has some form of afterlife, whether you're going pearly gates or this or reincarnated. So it's interesting. That's all okay, except for maybe this paranormal ghosty side of things.
Yep. And it opens you up to lawsuits because the government gets involved at some point. So before we had these funeral directors associations telling us what to do, people were able to keep bodies at home for as long as they needed to grieve this person and say, we want to keep you with us. And now it's, you have 24 hours or 48 hours to cremate, refrigerate. There are so many restrictions. And one of them would be, if I were to own a funeral home and say, I want to bring in a medium to talk with our people, our guests, that puts you open for lawsuits.
That's wild.
Mm-hmm.
One of my best I'm a medium. One of my best mediumship sessions was with a mortician who also is extraordinarily gifted. And I was called in by a woman who lost her son and her husband within the same week. Wow. And the grief was bearable to her. And what the three of us did we finished each other's sentences. And it was probably the best experience one could have for a woman who just lost her husband and her son. So that it's sad that it's like that, because literally I've gotten things like iPhone codes from the deceased so the wife could get, the photos off, stuff like that. So hopefully that changes.
Yeah, that's why I continue with my platform. I do a lecture. It is called Grief and Ghost Hunting, and I explore those. And I try to bring back historical accounts of grief and things people have gone through. And I talk about what we're doing to spirits today when we say, you're going to die alone at a nursing home by yourself, and a stranger's going to come and get you, and they're going to take you away. And I'm going to ID your body, not in person, but with a photo, and you're sanitized. You're treated like a biohazard, and how that's going to affect which of the people from our life linger and look out for us, because we've told them they're essentially to be discarded.
Wow, that's amazing. So have you had, in going into the embalming field, working within a mortuary, have you had paranormal experiences? I know you started talking about the iffiness of graveyards, haunted, not haunted, the dead is there. What about the mortuary itself?
I would say there have been times where you'll feel the presence of the person when you're transferring them into your care in their home where they recently passed, and all of their things and their family are there, and it almost feels as though they could be watching that. But I haven't found this idea of, oh, you're working with the deceased. I think they understand you as a function. You're almost a tool. You are washing them, and that's it. It's a relationship to make sure that their remains are respected. But at the same time, I haven't found anything of that nature. I have found, I would say, maybe non-human entities may linger at funeral homes, born from grief or frustration from people working in them. And at my last funeral home that I worked at, I had someone say, oh, there's this going on back here. I just tell it to get off me when it gets too close. And I'm thinking, that's not a person. That's not a human spirit. That's something clicking onto you and sticking, spiritual muck of some sort.
Which it could be, like you said, created from grief, like a tulpa, egregore, servitor, whatever that is, self-created, or an elemental, or lots of things in my belief system. But that's a trip. That's good.
Yeah.
So getting into your paranormal world, I see you've done all sorts of amazing investigations. I have to ask you about one specifically because I'm obsessed with it, and I don't know why I'm obsessed with it, and I haven't been there, and I don't know why I haven't been there. and it's Gettysburg. Uh, for some reason, I'm not that into war and I'm not overly into history, but I am obsessed with Gettysburg. So whether it's a past life thing. So what was your experience there?
You know what's interesting? Out of all the places I've been to, I have been the least connected to Gettysburg. And I'm from Pennsylvania. I was born and raised there. My parents tried to get me to go there. They're like, you love the paranormal, you love these places. They go on little trips there every couple of years, and they've always tried to get me to go. And I love history, I love the antiquing. And when I went to Gettysburg the first time, I'm like, I don't quite get it. And maybe that apprehension was because I wasn't ready to understand what was going on. I returned again. I stayed at the Farnsworth House, and as I start to stay in these places, and you're given a certain itinerary or rubric when it comes to studying war when you're growing up, when you're in grade school, and they're telling you how to perceive it. You're not told, put yourself in the shoes of what it would be like to be on the cusp of your life and being ready to start your life and imagining what you're going to be and what career you're going to take on. But instead, you're sent to fight this war that you don't quite understand. And then it started to click for me. So it is an overwhelming sense of sadness, but it takes a certain level of empathy, not just looking from the outside in, but truly trying to understand any side of the war, right or wrong, or there's this self-imposed sense of I need to be here. And then you start looking at places like the orphanage. Those were children no matter what, through and through. This upcoming trip that I'm going to be taking to Gettysburg is going to be more immersed than I've ever really spent. It's going to be the most time I've spent there, but I am trying to understand it. But I would say Gettysburg is like a front to back dictionary. It's 6 inches thick, and you have to start pulling up and truly learning it. I think if you're just in there for a vacation on a surface level, you're not going to understand. And when I was at the Farnsworth House, I did find we were having these experiences, and there's people who have studied it at length. We have friends that wrote books on it, and it was just, I just imagined them going up the steps and really trying to understand what they were feeling, knowing with the bodies piling outside that they would be next. And maybe I'll never be able to understand that and truly connect with those spirits on that way, because I don't think it's fathomable. You can dress up, you can reenact. It's unimaginable what those people experienced.
I get it. That's why why my obsession? So thank you for that. It'll be interesting when you go and see the deep dive. What is your since it's October, it is spooky season. The veil is thin is what I believe. So there's going to be more activity noticeable to people around. Has been have you had a most memorable experience of the paranormal, good or bad? Or
I think every facet of my experiences has a reason, but I will, because it is October, I'll tell you what I would consider what I thought was the worst one, but I guess the most misunderstood one is what I like to say now. When I moved into my first apartment with my boyfriend at the time 10 years ago, I was living in this apartment. It sat on land that used to be a farm, but I don't think it had any connection to what happened. And we had some friends over late at night, and I had gone to bed a little bit earlier, and then my boyfriend came to bed, and the other 2 people had been staying out a little bit later. So that's why it didn't immediately alarm me. And I was dead asleep, and my bedroom door slammed open with full force. And I look and I see a full figure, and I was frozen in fear. And I saw the whites of eyes, but I could not make out anything else. Wow. And I had sleep paralysis, but I could move my mouth. So it almost felt like a dream. And I remember thinking in that moment, I'm going to die. Like, this is it. Like, this is how I die. I'm going to get stabbed. And I know that's horrific because now I don't think of it that way. But I was like, wake up, like saying it through my teeth. I don't know if it was audible or not. And as soon as it backed out of the door and I heard my roommate's door open, and I said, oh no, I've gotten it all wrong. My roommate came in my room and he didn't want to wake us up, so he backed out. And there was this awful smell, like mothballs, the worst, most disgusting smell. It was a distinct, like mothball smell, like sour. And I checked my phone and it said 4:15 in the morning. And I was like, that's too late for bar hours. What was he doing? And the next morning, I woke my boyfriend up and I said, can you please ask Rich why he was in our room last night? And he was like, Rich didn't come in our room. I don't know why you're thinking that, Becky. And I was like, something happened. So I went to work as usual. And you would think, okay, maybe I had a sleep paralysis experience or there was an actual person in the home. And I get a call around 10 a.m. and they said, Becky, we are trying to figure out what was in the house last night. And so Rich rode his bike up to my job and he said, we need to talk about this right now. And I said, okay, what happened to you? He said, whatever that was, came in his room, touched his leg, and then just went down the stairs, waving its arms, just like wiggly waving its arms backwards down the stairs, but never left the front or back door, which were both locked. So we don't know where it went. And I said, what time was it then? And in unison, we go, 4:15 in the morning. And I became consumed with this idea that we had a house intruder. We need to call the police. And we're like, let's not. We don't know. We don't have proof. What's the point of calling the police at this point? I was obsessed looking on the porch for this person that I would think I would identify. And one day it just clicked. And I said to Rich, that wasn't a person, was it? And he was like, no. And I remember a few nights that I was like obsessed with the idea and trying to figure out what it was. And then I was like, okay, that was some sort of shadow entity. It didn't mean to harm me. That's how he was saying hello. And he scared me. And he scared my roommate. And recently, now it's been 10 years, I told Rich I've started to talk about the story as a paranormal experience rather than a home intruder, because that is what it was. And we can finally accept that and not gaslight ourselves into not believing what happened. And he said, we hadn't spoken a few years. He said, I saw it a few more times after that. And that was when it was like, what was that? What was it trying to say? We never saw it again. And I know there's someone living in there now. And I'm like, wonder if that ever comes in, or was it something with Rich that had been following him? But that was pretty profound.
Interesting. And you really were convinced it was a real person when they were first there. I'm going to get stabbed. Wow.
Yeah. And I was just like, why can't I focus on a distinct, like, why can't I make out what they're wearing, any features on this person? And now I know why. And Rich said the same thing. He was like, he smelled like vomit. And at first I was like, getting out from the bar. No, nobody's getting out of the bar at 4 a.m. Small town, by the way. So this town has maybe 1,000 people that live there. So it's not like a busy city where things like this go on. And again, the doors were locked. And he was like, I even went in the basement because there was like a strange hole that was covered with a tire in the basement. And he was like, I thought maybe it came from the hole in the basement. I'm like, we're not going to explore these ideas. So now that I'm more experienced, I'm like, I wish I would have gone back and just tried to replicate that and interact with whatever was happening.
That's what I always do. Just talk to them. Either tell them to leave, or if it's not that scary or scary but not dangerous, talk.
Yeah.
Speaking of things and in the home, I hear you've been bringing things home lately. What?
You know, it was not intentional, and I'm sure you can relate to this, but you get to a certain point where you're doing investigations, going to haunted places, and working in this field, and people just start giving you things. You don't ask for them. You're not soliciting to these objects. And it just, a few months ago, this floodgate opened up where people started giving me these objects that are seemingly regular objects, but they end up having these really strange stories. And I collect some things, like I do collect talking boards. I have for 10 years. I have a lot of strong opinions about those, but I never really thought about haunted objects or like the things that would have their own stories. And when I travel, I try to bring home an antique versus a souvenir because I'm an old soul. I grew up in an antique store. My parents ran the antique store while we lived upstairs. So I'd rather take home something special that's just for me that I'm meant to have. And it feels like it fits into a puzzle. So we were traveling in Charlotte, North Carolina. I was scouring social media for Facebook Marketplace. I was scouring for something to bring home. And I came across this morning lithograph from the 1800s with a photograph of these two twins and a photograph of two gentlemen. And I messaged the seller and I was like, hey, I'm interested in buying this. And she said, someone's already claimed it. And I was like, of course, I find the perfect thing and someone's getting it. And I didn't want to tell my partner, hey, it's 4 hours away. We're going to have to drive 4 hours to get this stuff. So the next morning she messages me and she said, you know what? If you want it, you can have it. You don't have to pay. And I was like, for free? She didn't know who I was. She's, you can have it. And she's, I'll even drive 2 hours to give it to you. And I was like, so you're going to drive 2 hours and give me these for free? That is so incredibly kind. It wasn't until we were like laying in bed, like almost asleep. And I said, something's not right. You don't just, what if there's a reason she's giving them to us? And we met her in Anderson, South Carolina. She gives us them with a book from the 50s on demonology and witchcraft. And I was like, there couldn't be any more like signs falling into place that there's something going on here. So the next day I'm at the hotel. I start researching the objects. I go on this rabbit hole by the name of the road. I'm like, I bet the name of the road the house they came from was on is actually the last name of the original owners of the house, which is probably their name. So I follow this rabbit hole. I find this family that has had this horrible tragedy happen. Someone crashed into the house, and one of the gentlemen in the photographs, he actually had a heart attack because the crash was so traumatic for him to see when he was trying to help them, and he passed away. And then one of the sons was hit by a train the same week that his mother died. And there's an article that says this family has been plagued by the streak of bad luck. And then one of the twins in the photographs actually passed away at 10 months old. So we bring them home, and I was like, all right, I'm going back to Connecticut. Have fun with these portraits that I brought home. And he calls me within a half hour of me leaving. And he said, I was watching TV, and that closet that he has storage with those plastic tubs that you use for storage in, they're all on a shelf. Every single tub, even though the shelf was sitting there stationary and didn't fall, all of the tubs had fallen. Like the closet was essentially eviscerated. And the shelf didn't fall. So it's not like the shelf fell and knocked him over. Something pushed all these off. And I was like, okay, I'll come back. I'll see what's going on. And we started investigating. And I was like, who did this in the closet? And we hear, I'm scared. And then I was like, of course they would be scared. I brought them from Georgia from their custodian that they had for 10 years. And if it's an infant spirit, probably the older twin might be attached to the portrait because he never got to truly grow with his younger twin. And that's probably the only picture of her. And we bought a rattle, like an antique rattle that made sense, and pacified them. And we haven't had any experiences yet or since then. We haven't really interacted with them because I don't think of them as do something for me. It's just, I keep you safe, and things have been good since. But then this opened up, like, I guess, the inspiration for other people to do similar things. And a few weeks later, I messaged a guy and I was like, hey, I'm interested in this talking board you have for sale. And he said, it's $150. When I drive 3 hours to meet him, he said, I don't want any money. You can have it for free. And I was like, what's going on? You know how much this is worth. Why? It has plagued my life for 10 years. It came from a home where a woman passed away. Her body was undiscovered for some time. And I just have had people screaming at me about it. And all of these other things have happened. And I was like, okay. And I guess he just didn't want the exchange of one item for the other and to have that money. And so I took that into my custody. I called my friend who's a medium, and I was like, Seth, I think I brought home something bad. And then we worked with it, and we're like, okay, it's just misunderstood. She was left. And of course she would be attached to the first object that someone saw and was like, this is amazing, because nobody saw value in her when she passed away because they didn't come see her, check on her. So when they saw value in an object, that inspired her to maybe gravitate towards her talking board she used to communicate. That was hers. And the last one was shortly after I had someone reach out to me, and they're like, I do have this one thing. It was an auction house, and it was like a movie. He takes me to the back of the auction house, and there's this clock. It's got cobwebs over it. And it was literally like illuminated by one little spotlight. And that's the clock. Someone made it while they're in prison for their daughter. Their daughter gave it to me over 10 years ago. Nobody wants to touch it. And he was like, she left a fake number. You can have it. And I was like, what am I doing? I made a mental note to bring home no more haunted objects until I felt like I truly told the stories and took care of them the right way. But it was just like this rapid fire of all of these objects with true and really wild stories.
Wow. So has the clock acted up anything yet?
I keep it closed, so it is really unusual. It is probably the thing that is most ominous in my house. It opens up and it has 3 shelves and it's got different Disney characters and Looney Tunes, and it was made in Sing Prison in New York. And I just have this feeling that if I were to open it and leave it open, something might happen, but keeping it closed and on a pedestal, just it's just a mutual respect that I have, and I haven't encouraged anything to happen. But the first time I brought it home, I was like, this kind of makes me feel, because there are victims involved, and I don't collect murderabilia. I don't think it's cool to glamorize those kind of things. Sometimes you're given things when people are in fear and you are helping them. They want to get rid of the object, shouldn't be thrown away. This story doesn't deserve to be forgotten, but at the same time, I want to make sure that I'm not platforming or elevating something like that.
That's good. Me too. People like to give us things. I'm just right over my head. My little doll Belle, my 110-year-old, was given to me by a girl who the doll made her sick for 3 years, made her hair fall out, made her kid sick. And she's like, can I send it to you? I'm like, sure. And the doll had so much power. Like 50,000 people watched me open. I don't have that many followers that 50,000 people watched me open. It was Belle, not me. But I would not, there was something so dark attached to her. This is my area of expertise. I would not let the sun go down before I got that dark thing out. And then there was a beautiful little haunted girl inside, and now she's a part of the family, and people see her move all the time. I have to keep her back far enough she doesn't take full focus of my guest and myself on the thing. But you do have to be careful with your house, because you would keep that one protected. I had one thing that was just, at first I was okay with it, given to me by a client. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, why am I not spending time in my office? There's a reason. Like everything else, oh, it's that. So I actually called Zach Bagans. I said, this is too dark for me. Do you want? And of course, it's at the museum now and started acting up that first night, because our homes have to be sacred, especially for you and I who do this kind of work that we're doing. We're opening portals all the time.
Yeah, and that's true with the clock. It's still new. This is the past few months, and I'm still getting to know it, and there's been consideration of what truly needs to be done with it. And I've talked to a few people, and I said, for some reason, I feel like this isn't for me, especially since I had made a conscious decision to not take in any more objects for some time, but it fell into my hands. And I don't know what the final result will be. We talked about dismantling it because that girl was traumatized and wanted to be rid of her father's actions. And there are victims that her father, he killed people. Like, that is who made this. And when he made this clock, I don't think he was making it for his little girl. I think it was to absolve himself of guilt. And for a while I said, I'm going to be silent. But then I'm like, that dismisses the fact that there are people out there that have gone through this. So it's still a decision I need to make. I don't know what needs to be done, if there's going to be some sort of ritual involved or something that needs to keep it closed. But right now it's been quiet, but it might be waiting or doing a slow creep. Maybe I've been slowly getting more tired or something and not realized it just hasn't caught up yet.
Right. It'll drain you. So before we go, let me go back to talking boards. I collect them as well. I've been using them safely since I was 7 or 8 years old. So you said you have very strong opinions about them?
So I personally have been a big advocate for responsible use and respect of the board. I have been collecting since I came across a collection someone was letting go. It was actually a magician in Texas, and she sold me a Ouija girl, which it's a 1940s board with a girl with a crystal ball and stars. And I just feel like the history of the board has been so disrespected. It's been taken by men who fought over it. The women involved have been completely erased, other than the people in the Talking Board Historical Society are working to bring these names and these stories forward. And I feel like we do a big disservice by just dismissing it as something that causes bad. That being said, I have had people send me boards that they felt like cursed their life, and I don't put them on display. I leave them in the box the person sent them to me, because without knowing it, they've done themselves a little ritual, putting the tape in the label and releasing themselves. I'm like, I'm going to keep this safe for you. This isn't for content. This isn't social media. This is me doing something which I believe is genuinely helping these folks. But yeah, I don't get angry. I respect people who don't feel like it's for them or that it could harm them, because as we know, if you're open to that leading to something negative, it could potentially take you down because you think that's what's going to happen. So I say I respect your opinion, but I personally think it's a great tool. I think it's something that really resonates and connects with me. I think it's an amazing part of American history. That's one of the things that I love about it, is that we here started and popularized that. And so I feel like it connects to us living in this country a little bit more than other tools that originated elsewhere. So I do have a really big collection, and I do love to see the different art. I don't see it different as like a bunch of tarot decks. They have all the different art, and some resonate differently on different days. So I think that's really cool that you collect them as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, and I have one, same thing. People have shown up at my door. I had done filming a TV something once, and like a week or two later, a crew member who was just like the lighting guy, he hands me this 1920s board. He's, just take this. Okay. But that's actually fine. I check everything out. But oh, Eddie's showing Scared and Alone Spirit Board Queen. Oh, you could have a dress with a spirit board on it. That's on mysterycontrol.com. Thank you, producer Rob. I love it. Spirit board, everything. Anyway, you are fascinating. I have a million more questions, but we'll just have to have you back, if you will. Yes. But tell people now that they're going to be are as intrigued as I am, where they can find you, what you have coming up, your social media, website, all that kind of stuff.
Sure. I can be found on TikTok and Instagram as My Bloody Galentine. I typically operate on those two platforms. I've been expanding. I do have a documentary coming out called Historically Haunted, the Grand Midway Hotel, in which we actually do encounter an inhuman spirit. And sorry, car going by. And in that documentary, we kind of work through this entity that's oppressing other spirits. So that's going to be coming out within the next few months. And I also can be found at the next Strange Escapes event in Gettysburg, which will happen the weekend after Halloween. So we'll keep the spooky season rolling.
Yay. Oh, that's perfect. So you guys like her, follow her. She's delightful. And thank you, Beckie-Ann, for bringing your magic to the witching hour.
Thank you so much, Patti.
Ah.